Sister Sister. This is one of those sitcoms that was part of the huge plethora of black shows that dominated the comedy scene in the 1990s. A show about two sisters separated at birth and adopted by two separate foster parents, and living their childhood as single kids. Until that fateful day when they meet accidentally at a clothes store.
Your baby. Hey, watch that now. Wait a minute here. What?
Dad? Mom? That girl has my face!
Following the initial joy and chaos, the two sisters, Tia and Tamara, are allowed to live together with Tia's mom Lisa and Tamara's dad Ray, all living under Ray's house. They become one big funny, dysfunctional family. Now, when I first came across Sister Sister back in the mid-90s, seeing the trailer for the show, I thought it came across as very goofy, especially with the twins constantly breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience. I remember thinking, this looks very silly. Needless to say, I was not won over. And then by the time the show had reached its third season, I remember flicking through channels and it was on. And up until that point, I really wasn't into the show. And then I just watched a certain episode, and for some reason it just connected with me. And then I kept tuning into every subsequent episode, and before I knew it, I was hooked. Better late than never. I really felt seasons 4 to 6 were the best years for Sister Sister personally, because this was when the girls were really entering those phases of teenhood to adulthood. They were really discovering their individualities and identities, as opposed to just being young girls, being twins joined at the hip and always wearing the exact same clothes. I would go back and watch the first 3 seasons of the show, and over time I also grew to enjoy those early stages. But the final 3 seasons remain my favourite parts of the show's run. I did like them always speaking in unison. It was like their trademark.
November 28th, 1979! See? Not having a date.
Now, of course, that wasn't their only trademark. Enter Marcus Houston, aka Roger Evans.
Go home, Roger! Go home, Roger! Go home, Roger! Go home, Roger!
From the get-go, he tries to hook up with both the girls, even though he's a year younger. And looking at his appearance in the first season, he really looks short and goofy. But then he was 11 years old when the show came out, so there you go. He's like their version of Steve Urkel from Family Matters, only his dress sense was much better. But considering this was the early 90s, those clothes were just... no. Ugh, no way. No way. And by the time season 4 arrives, he had a growth spurt, and he went from being a perfect annoying little troll to a young stud, and the twins were actually into him.
I'm gonna go out with Roger. Don't tell my sister.
Until he was rumbled after he had a plethora of girls he was also dating at the same time. Dude, don't eat where you... Your player game was just off point. He was an ever-present for the first 4 seasons, but from season 5 his appearances became sporadic, which coincided with Tia and Tamara having permanent boyfriends at this point. But in real life, Marcus Houston's mother did pass away, so he was eventually written out of the show as he was looking to take time off. And we don't even see him for all of season 6 until the very last episode. Even though the show was primarily about the twins, the heart and soul, in my mind, is Ray and Lisa, the adoptive parents of the girls. Lisa was an aspiring fashion designer, and Ray had his limo business. This, for me, I felt helped portray black folks in a positive light, rather than just the standard trope of growing up in the projects and working low-paying jobs to survive and to feed their families. Ray and Lisa were in that working to upper working middle class. It wasn't always plain sailing, but they had decent paying careers which they had to work hard to achieve whilst looking after their daughters. It fits in with that narrative of black TV characters that were intelligent, hardworking, and had a very good financial footing, as the characters from other black sitcoms could attest to. Lisa was bubbly, loud, funny, but kind.
Please, no man could disagree with anything that looks this good.
Ray was a bit stuffy and strict. He had a conservative approach when it came to dealing with money, and he was a member of the Republican Party. I wonder if he'd still be a member in today's current climate. Going off topic there. But at his core, he was an excellent dad to Tamira and Tia, and he was always there for them when it really mattered. The dynamic between the parents and the girls was very interesting. Ray was more of an intellectual, just like Tia, whilst Lisa was loud and outgoing and a man chaser, just like Tamira. Lisa and Ray had a will they, won't they type relationship. They did make out in the last episode of season 1, but only because they were thinking of other people. Now, how does that work? They dated for a bit during season 4, but then they ultimately decided to remain friends. Ray would go on to have a string of dates throughout the show's run, as did Lisa. Lisa would end up getting married to her new beau Victor Sims in the last episode of the show. I did mention that season 4 to 6 were my favourite eras of the show. It was in season 5 in particular that the girls had a new dynamic to play off of. This was in the form of boyfriends. It was always inevitable that the girls were going to get hooked up, and they had dated guys on the show before, but nothing really stuck. But that was all about to change from this point on, and it duly came in the form of Jordan and Tyreek. What I also loved about it was the pair became permanent characters on the show. Tyreek Scott is a bit of a mystery man at first when he runs into Tia at the mall, which indirectly leads to her getting a job there. Unbeknownst to Tia, Tyreek is an intern mechanic for Ray, and as the season unfolds, the pair become better acquainted, and they do end up becoming a couple, but not without its usual share of drawbacks. Tyreek, as it turns out, is a convicted felon from the streets, so that doesn't sit too well with both Ray and Lisa. He reveals his conviction was only as a result of taking heat for a relative. The relationship does unfortunately come to an abrupt end a few episodes into season 6 when Tia has the hots for a teaching assistant. It ultimately leads to nothing, and realizing she's made an error, attempts to go back with Tyreek, who says not this time, and the two separate. But for the rest of the season, it was teased over and over again about them getting back together, and it finally came ahead, and the two reunite in episode 18, Freaknik. Jordan Bennett, Kenny from The Cosby Show, yes, I had to do a double take when I first saw that, he ends up as Tamira's boyfriend. Now, things don't go off to a flying start as the two initially argue back and forth, and just generally don't get along with each other. But in typical sitcom fashion, yeah, you guessed it, they really did like each other, and the two end up dating.
I say.
I do not.
You do too. You're doing it now. That's why it's so impossible for me to tell you that I like you.
Well, that's ridiculous because I have no trouble saying I like you.
Surprisingly, with both being strong-willed, stubborn characters, they end up staying together for the rest of the series with no breakups at all. Kenny does come off a little bit of a chauvinist at the beginning, but over time his character grows on you, and he has excellent chemistry with Tamira. They did have plenty of back and forth, which made the relationship funny and very interesting.
You women always get so emotional over nothing.
You women? Being a woman has nothing to do with it.
You're only saying that because you're a woman.
Well, now, I'm saying this.
Cementing them as one of black sitcom's all-time favourite couples. At least, I think so. Wow. And after all that, I just realised I haven't even mentioned the leads of the show. So Tia and Tamira, the whole twin sister separation thing I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So Tia is the smart one, straight A's and a general all-round genius and hard-working gal. But by all means, she is not Miss Perfect. She can be a bit insecure about her look sometimes, and a little bit on the shallow side. Her friend Elliot has a huge crush on her, but as he's a nerd, Tia is just not attracted to him, until Tamara turns him into the perfect guy, and suddenly, she likes him. But to her credit, it becomes obvious that the two were just meant to be friends, and it's really Tamara that she should be with him. But a lovely girl, sacrificing her needs for her sisters. But then they never followed up on that Elliot and Tamara relationship, which was very frustrating. Oh well. Tamara is the party girl with an eye for the boys. It's funny because I initially had a crush on Tia at first, but over time I kind of shifted towards Tamara, especially from season 5. I think part of that was her story arc, going from the young party girl to a strong opinionated woman not afraid to back down from her own views. This was displayed not just with her relationship with Jordan or her bond with Tia, but against her dad Ray, especially season 6 episode Bum Rap, where Ray is supporting a bill for which all concerts will be banned from being played on college campuses. Tamara is vehemently against this, and after an argument between the two, they end up in a political debate against each other. It all ends well though when the two come to a compromise. But this particular story showed to me Tamara's strong will in her beliefs, but the maturity to show compromise, which I personally related to, as I have strong females in my family who don't back down from adversity no matter how tough things get. The power of a strong black woman. The show had a very comforting good feel factor, to which made it great to watch, and I watch it over and over again up until this very day. Despite the horrendous fashion seen in the early stages of the show, I feel it has aged very well, and the demand for it was so great that Netflix released it onto their streaming services, and unsurprisingly, the show has done very well. Given these crazy pandemic times that we're experiencing, I feel it's the perfect antidote to wash away your worries. Just binge watch the whole series. As we all saw, Tia had a mole for the first 3 seasons, but then it magically disappeared after season 3, whilst Tamara's remained, which reflected their real life looks, which begs the question, why couldn't they have just done it like that to begin with? Come on. Also, there's an interesting fact about the girl's character on the show. I shall digress to Tia for that brief explanation.
On the show, Tamara was the one that was not the brainiac and I was, where actually in real life it's the other way around. So my sister is the one that, you know, in college and in high school and school was like the brainiac. She could just pick up things so easily, where with me, it would take me forever to, you know, get the concept or whatever that was going on in school. So, cool tip.
And of course the girls showed off their natural talents of being able to sing, and along with Marcus Houston, who was part of the group Immature, I felt that this added to the success of the show. There was no lip-syncing nonsense, it was just pure God-given natural talent. The show wasn't afraid to tackle various issues like low self-esteem, sibling rivalry, religious beliefs, bullying, and black history. One particular story that moved me was the reuniting of the twins with their real-life father. Just the way it dramatically unfolded was very moving, and having Mr. Sullivan welcomed by both Ray and Lisa just added to that feel-good factor of that particular episode and the whole ambience of the show as a whole.
Does that camera come with an automatic timer?
Sure, why?
Why don't you join us?
You don't have to ask me twice. Okay. Now, on the count of 3, everyone say Mandela. 1, 2.
Matt, you're gonna fit in this family just fine.
The show had a lot of notable big-name guest stars, including a certain Cookie Lyons. With this video, I don't know if I can say I've done the show justice. Yeah, probably not. But I can state what a great show this was. Streaming services will always play a part in creating new generations of fans for retro shows. And thanks to Netflix, Sister Sister has brought about new fans from the show, whilst reigniting that great nostalgia my generation had. Through all the laughs and the drama lies one of the best sitcoms to ever grace our TV screens.